This is going to be a very short explanation of the definition of rational versus irrational numbers, just to save us some time when we go to discuss irrational numbers in class. So the two things that we're going to be discussing in this very short video are how are irrational numbers identified, and then how are you going to use your calculator to find a decimal approximation for an irrational number. Okay, so what is an irrational number? An irrational number doesn't terminate. Terminate means to end. And it doesn't have any sort of repetition to it in the decimal representation. So something like 4.11111, that has repetition to it. Whereas something like 4.13141318, no real rhyme or reason over there, that does not have repetition to it. So the formal definition for an irrational number is the set x such that x is a number represented by a non-repeating, non-terminating decimal. So if something is an irrational number, it can't be written as a fraction. Okay, so then we're going to need to be able to decide whether a number is rational or whether a number is irrational. And this is going to be a sort of large piece of your homework assignment. So I want to go through 4 tips for you to look for to decide. First of all, if something is a fraction, then it's going to be listed as rational. So anytime you see a fraction, if it asks you rational or irrational, it's going to be rational. If you have a square root, then it's irrational as long as it doesn't simplify. So what does that mean? Well, the square root of 9 is 3. So that's going to be considered rational. Versus the square root of 10 does not simplify, so that would be irrational. If the decimal comes to an end, then it's rational, if it terminates. And finally, if a decimal does not have repetition to it, then it's irrational. So here are 4 examples that I want to look at, and then I'm going to give you some practice to try as well. 4/9, rational or irrational? This would be considered rational. Why? Because it's written as a fraction. Square root of 10 would be considered irrational. We've already talked about that one. 1.618, that's rational because it comes to an end. Okay, it has an ending spot. And then the last one would be considered irrational because there's no actual repetition to it. In your homework for this section, you're going to need a calculator with a square root button on it. You're going to be asked to find decimal representations of square roots. So you're going to take the square root of, for example, 8. You're going to need to be able to enter that on your calculator. Be careful, you will be doing some square roots of fractions. You're going to need to use parentheses around those fractions. So if you have trouble with your calculator, please see me so that I can teach you how to use your particular calculator correctly so that when you go to simplify those on your calculator for your homework, you do them correctly.